from his MPs over personal independence payments, PIPs, with some pundits even went as far to say would have been a confidence vote in his leadership, just shy of his party's first birthday. Happy birthday, right? Now, in this past hour, we've also learned that the changes to PIP will now not even take place until after a review has concluded. So that means no previous claimant will lose out. That's all a given, even if we believe they may be on the fiddle. We can't investigate them. That was the first major concession. And we learnt in this past hour from Sir Stephen Timms that now no future claimants will be probed until when? We simply don't know when that will happen. Well, with all of that in mind, precisely what is left to vote on tonight? Let's take some live pictures now from the Commons. The debate is raging on.
Kate Durden.
And there we go. The vote is now about to commence. And I'm joined by my panel in the studio to try and make some sense, trying to make you to get some sense of what's going on here, because I think we all need a bit of help. And I'm joined, I'm delighted to say, in the studio by the Labour peer, Lord Maurice Glassman. And I'm also joined by Alice Denby, who's the opinion and the features editor at City AM. Let's first come to you, if I could, Lord Maurice Glassman. Has to be said, it seems like a complete and utter mess. Nobody seems to know what the bill even stands for now. It was initially meant to be a £5 billion saving. It was watered down yesterday to £2.5 billion of saving. That's only a 2.5 percentile of the ballooning £100 billion bill by the end of the decade. And now it seems it could be precisely nothing that's being saved. Please, my learned friend, can I ask you what on earth is going on? So I'm going to go to Alice Denby, beg your pardon, the opinion and freelance editor at City AM, while we get to Lord Glassman wired up. Alice, what do you make of what is appearing now to be something of an emerging farce?
I mean, this looks absolutely catastrophic for the Prime Minister, an absolute blow to his authority. A man who won an 80-seat majority just a year ago, looking this weak, facing a rebellion on this scale. But honestly, I don't think that's the thing that matters the most about this. I think what really matters to the country, a country that is facing a spiralling welfare bill. These changes were only supposed to shave a mere £4 billion off a bill that's gone up £30 billion since the pandemic, massively driven by young people, people under 30, claiming that they're unable to work because they have mental health conditions. I think you've got to say a proportion of those clearly gaming the system. PIP clearly needs to be reformed, and that's not to say that it's not an important part of the welfare system to help the genuinely disabled work. But what are we saying now? That it doesn't need reforming at all? Or that the existing definition is absolutely fine, but people in the future will be labouring under a completely different definition? That, you know, this delay is also a huge incentive to anyone who thinks they may have a mental health condition that can get them signed off work to try and do it as quickly as possible before a new definition comes in. And I think the far bigger problem here is that we have a state that is on course to be costing £1.4 trillion by 2030. We simply can't afford a public spending bill that is £24,000 per adult of the working age population. We do need to reform welfare. It seems that the only thing this Labour government knows how to do is to tax people. Labour want people to be dependent on the state. This is showing you who they really are.
Lord Maurice Glassman, let's bring you in now. This was meant to be a flagship piece of legislation. It's descending into farce.
Oh, dog's breakfast, I think, comes to mind. And just to correct you, Alice, there's lots of people in Labour like me who are very serious about this. I mean, this is not absolutely not the case. What we've got is a situation where when the Conservatives won in 2019, honestly, we thought that Labour would be out for 10 years. So we've got a government, it's a lot more than an 80-seat majority. We've got 71% of the seats. I mean, it's an overwhelming majority. And the government, this is clear, was unprepared strategically for the challenges. So it was a gesture of, well, we've got to start reforming welfare. So what I'm saying to you, Martin, is you can, for people like me, this is actually an opportunity to say no more ad hoc salami slicing. There's got to be a fundamental rethink of the foundations of the state. And what are the priorities of the state? Now, my priorities are doubling the army, building up our defences, controlling our borders, and reindustrialisation, full employment, work. And what we've got to look at is we've got to go back to Frank Field, we've got to look at contributory systems. We've really got to rethink this because, this, as you say, Alice, is the idea that, 40% of 18 to 24-year-olds are in some way disabled is just an insane proposition. So it's not the case that they're saying, Martin, just to correct you, that there will be no review of PIP. What's going to happen is Stephen Timms is going to do this review, and this is going to be a proper political battle inside Labour.
No, but I'm not saying there won't be a review. I'm saying there will be a review. People, maybe I'm wrong, were leading to understand that when this vote was voted through tonight, then it will become law. But now it's like that's not the case. There'll be a further review, and we don't know how long is a piece of string. And so Kemi Badenoch has said in this past half hour, this is a total waste of time. It effectively saves the government £0. It helps no one back into work and does not control spending. And the bigger question here, Lord Maurice Glassman, is what faith can we have in Rachel Reeves as Chancellor to make these stringent cutbacks for all of the noble, laudable things that you're talking about, where money needs to be spent, where we need to redirect our energy, our initiative, our focus and our finances. And instead, they can't seem to make a cost saving even when they want to. A U-turn on the winter fuel allowance and now a total U-turn on this.
Yeah, so the situation is there doesn't seem to be any strategic vision right now for how to reform the state. I give them the credit of they wanted to, and they've now come up against a Conservative resistance, and I understand that resistance to some extent because it's not part of a systematic programme of national renewal. This is what we need. And so I'm saying that this Stephen Timms has put a huge pressure on himself here. Yeah. I mean, this has got to be a new beverage. This has got to be a rethinking of the welfare system. They can't fudge it this time. It's real and it's on. And we're going to have to be thinking really. I'm a proper Labour socialist. My idea is you don't give people free stuff. Everybody contributes and works. That's got to be the foundation of this.
I mean, I think it's so interesting to hear from a Labour peer because I think you're absolutely right. I think what we're seeing here is the consequences of Keir Starmer getting into power with no strategic vision. You say no idea what he wanted to actually do with power. I mean, I actually read the Labour manifesto and it only mentioned the word welfare twice. Both times it was in relation to animal rights. So they clearly had no plan to do this. They got into government and thought, blimey, we need to try and save some money somewhere, rather than thinking it through of, like, what is a better system to support the disabled.
Is the key, Martin. It's actually, first of all, not about the money. It's about what kind of country we are. What incentives do we give? What do we reward? What do we value? With this degree of welfare, we could genuinely be compassionate, merciful and just to every genuinely vulnerable person. But it's not like that. It's a horrible administrative system. It's dehumanising. It's the lanyard class, effectively, ruling there. And so there's got to be a real shift. And we've got this government, my government, has got from now until autumn to come up with a proper strategic plan for the reform of the state.
Do you think that's possible? We're seeing here a parliament and certainly a party tying itself in absolute knots. And I've had this conversation with you before, Maurice. It seems we have two entirely divided Labour parties, as we had with the Conservatives over Brexit. We had a Remain rump, we had a Brexit rump of Conservatives. It ended up doing them in. And what we're seeing here is a benefit culture Labour Party, many seats, of course, totally dependent on PIP, people voting for their MPs. If they voted this down, they'd lose their seat. But this is right? And then on the other hand, we've got the very real financial Armageddon. We're in the toilet. We've got to make cost savings. Let's go back to the Commons now. So, Lord Maurice Glassman, talk us through what's happening now. Obviously, they've been out to vote. They're back in. We're expecting this announcement relatively soon. And in terms of the metrics, the 120 rebels dwindled down to 50. And with continued watering down of the offer on the table, you'll expect this now to relatively easy swoop through for the Labour Party.
Yeah, it's definitely going to go through. That's not the issue. in order to get to this point, they've essentially abandoned the reforms. So we have to understand that. And what they've said is there's going to be a review by... Now, Stephen Timms is actually a very honourable man. And he's going to be under enormous pressure here to genuinely rethink the whole structure of the state. So what the area of sympathy I've got, Alice and Martin, is that we came in without having the preparation for the kind of government that we wanted, which was a transformative government that would actually be pro-worker, pro-work, patriotic. All of those things were in the manifesto, so you can vouch for that. And they've walked into this abyss where it looks like huge sections of the party are unreconciled to that vision. Yeah. So the political battle is now fully on.
And the thing about the party of the working people should be about getting people into work. As you said, Lord Glassman, a laudable aim, but we seem to have a great run for the Labour Party that seem hooked to the party of the work shy. Let's be blunt about this. Nobody should say that those who are actually deserving of PIPs, disability payments, they should not lose a penny. We can all agree on that.
On the contrary, I think we can all agree that where there are people genuinely disabled, it's a beautiful thing to support them.
That's what I'm saying.
But what we're talking about is millions of people who aren't like that. That's the point. And another thing, Martin, just to add to your point, which is this. You say it's for... Labour's vote is collapsing precisely in the areas where the PIP claimants are highest because people have had enough of this. They've had enough of this life. I mean, the winds of change are blowing, you know it. I mean, for example, my closest friend in Parliament, Dan Carden, who's in Liverpool, Walton, they've got the highest PIP payments and reform are riding high.
And here's the vote result now.
The ayes to the right, 149. Whoa. The noes to the left, 328.
The ayes to the right, 149. The noes to the left, 328. The noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many of that opinion say aye? Aye. Does the contrary no? No. The lobbying.
So there we go. We have a comprehensive victory for Keir Starmer's government. After some people thought this might go to the wire, nothing of the sort. The ayes, 149. The noes, 328. That means a significant victory for the Labour Party, for Keir Starmer. The rebellion was headed off, and it appears with those metrics, Lord Maurice Glasson, it was only the opposition that really voted this down. We'll have to look at the numbers of Labour MPs who went that way. But the numbers, this was a comprehensive victory for the government. And let's get now to our political editor, Chris Hope, who is live from us from Parliament. Chris Hope, after all the talk of there being wobbles for the Prime Minister, a comprehensive victory for the Labour government.
Yeah, things have changed though since last week, Martin. That amendment there was looking at possibly wrecking the entire benefits bill. By my calculations there, 477 MPs voted. A lot of MPs, maybe as much as 180, didn't vote at all, abstained. We'll wait till who they are. You could well be right that it was backed probably by the Tory party, by Reform UK. Not sure what the Lib Dems would have done there. So I think it may be the opposition parties voted for this amendment, given what happened. Well, there could have been, of course, a balance of 39 Labour MPs who supported it. But this place is in absolute ferment over this abandonment of these benefit cuts. I say cuts, not increasing the benefits bill by as much as before. Huge surprise. We'll wait and see how the second reading goes. There could also be a division shortly on what's called a programme motion. There's now some upset. The fact the government wants to push through the rump of this bill using statutory instruments which don't allow for a vote in Parliament. That's now upsetting left-wing Labour MPs. It feels like, frankly, the government's lost control of its backbenches in a week when it should be celebrating 1 year of Labour power.
The fact of the matter is, Chris Hope, another point is that Sir Stephen Timms made a significant intervention earlier on in Chamber, the Disabilities Minister, saying that the changes to PIP will now not take place until after a review of the benefit has concluded. We don't know how long that will take. We also know that the changes to PIP claims that exist already won't be changed. Here's the question. What was the point of this vote? Nothing's changed.
I'm not entirely sure what is the point of this bill. There are changes to the universal credit system, but they won't make the big savings that the PIP reforms would have done. We know when the Timms review, as it's now called, will report. That'll be autumn next year. Although the government does tell us tonight they will allow the OBR to score or to work out the value of those savings in the review, but they can't do that, I'd imagine, until the Timms review comes back. So we're not going to see any attempt at cutting the benefits bill meaningfully until later next year or the year after. And as Maurice Glassman says there vividly, areas in the country where the PIP claims are highest, that's where reform is surging, because people are living there. They look at the curtains drawn in the house next door, they go to work, the pals next door aren't working, they're living off the state, they're living off the taxes generated by someone's hard work, wherever it might be, and that is annoying, and that is driving support towards a party like Reform UK. Maurice Glassman, frankly, is saying the things which probably this government needs to hear. The votes are where Labour interacts with reform. This is a comfort blanket Parliamentary Labour Party going back into its shell here, not taking on the challenge of cutting benefits, and there's a problem here for them at the next election.
You're absolutely right there. Just to reiterate there, Chris Hope was being very complimentary of Sir Maurice Glassman there, pointing out the point that the top 10 areas of the councils with the highest number of benefits claimants are almost entirely Labour, the rump of them, in Wales, in Merseyside, in the northeast and northwest. These are the abandoned industrial heartlands. You know, perhaps there should be a strategy, Chris Hope, to try and get these people blooming well working again, not pushing this down the road to protect their benefits. And as you say, meanwhile, those who aren't on benefits are sitting around thinking, what's the point of me going to work every single day to pay for this lot to sit on their backsides?
That's right. This vote is going to trigger a complete rethink, I think, on how this government is doing its politics. What is Starmerism? What's it for? Is it trying to take the fight to those groups, those overlooked groups, which Maurice Glassman and yourself, Martin, are highlighting? That's where the support needs to go, and I think that's why these changes happened. The political problem here is that they are brought about quite quickly. Everyone knows benefit needs reforming. The problem they've got is there's a hole in the government accounts. They have a £9 billion kind of rainy day fund, a headroom. They can't eat into that because of sluggish growth and arguably the impact of the NICS increase and other employment taxes. That meant that they need more money. They found it on the backs of benefits claimants, but they've done it in a rush. And I think the feeling here is that it's done to balance the government's books because of a Treasury failure, not on these disabled people's failure. So they've got to get back to where that is and do proper thought about reform. The hope, I think, for anyone who wants to reform the benefit system is that this very, very bruising night won't mean the government runs away from it. I should say, by the way, I just saw Sue Gray scuttling through, or walking through, I should say, with a cup of coffee in a hurried way through Central Lobby. I wonder what she thinks. She, of course, was the Chief of Staff, blamed for that very awkward first 100 days that went badly for the government. It's not going very well now, is it?
Well, Sue Gray's probably thinking she's better off out of it. Thank you very much, Chris Hope. And we'll be crossing back live to you throughout the show. You're going to be grabbing guests for us in your own inimitable way. And I think actually you're trying to get hold of Nigel Farage before the show is out. Let's get back to studio now to try and make sense of what I think is just utter farce in Parliament tonight. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the former Minister for Disabled People at the Department for Work and Pensions Minister. That's Tom Pursglove, as well as my panel still here, Alice Denby, the opinion and features editor at City AM, and of course the Labour peer Lord Maurice Glassman. Let's first get to you, Tom Pursglove. Total farce.
Total farce. I think it's extraordinary that basic things like making sure that you've got the numbers has to be a cornerstone of your handling plan if you're a government minister. And the fact that the whips were warning Downing Street that they're in this position and those warnings went unheeded speaks to an arrogance at the heart of Number 10 that they thought they could just railroad this through. And you've got a whole host of different opinions about this on the Labour benches. I've heard some really impassioned speeches today from people worried about what the future holds for some of their constituents. There's also a very strong, principled, reasonable case for welfare reform. But this was never meaningful welfare reform. This was a cut dressed up as welfare reform. We're now in the totally unserious, farcical position where the minister at the dispatch box can't even confirm what the level of savings is. Actually, I don't find myself agreeing with Ian Lavery very often, but he was totally right when he stood up and said they should just pull the bill.
Tom Perscott, is it worth pointing out this rot set in under your watch, the Conservative Party, 2019 onwards, the end of face-to-face assessments? We have this ridiculous situation now where 20% of entire constituencies claim to have anxiety or depression. They're not being screened, they're not being monitored, they're simply getting away with it. The rot started on the Conservative Party's watch.
There was a strong welfare reform that was able to be delivered by this government when they came to office. I accept that COVID created a hell of a lot of problems when it came to trying to deal with these numbers. And actually, what should be at the forefront of reform in this area is people with mental health conditions, getting them the treatment and support that they need. We should be trying to get rid of work disincentives that are baked into the system, that see the 1 in 5 disabled people who say that they would like to try work and they would do so with the right support back off from doing that because of the jeopardy. If you try work, it doesn't work out, you lose your benefit entitlement. Those things are structurally wrong with the system, and that's why the policy that we consulted on and that was ready to go is the one that they should have pursued. But I do accept that there were difficult circumstances. I think the COVID pandemic created a whole lot of pressures for government. But actually, what we've seen since the election... Did the COVID pandemic get people... Did it depress the nation? Did it get us addicted to benefits? Actually, a plague on all the houses. Well, did all of the parliamentary parties vote, you know, for all of us to be isolated?
I've got to come in here because this all started with Margaret Thatcher. This whole PIP business, this whole disability allowance. When we deindustrialised and transferred all our wealth to China in the glorious days of Margaret Thatcher, she concealed the unemployment figures with disability allowance. That's precisely what happened in the mining villages.
But let's be clear about PIP, that many people who claim PIP are on work. It's not an out-of-work benefit.
Yeah, but that's the origin of this whole enormous growth, because it concealed... Do you remember, Martin, when we used to care about the unemployment figures? Yeah. So this comes from
But we had record low unemployment in the period that I was in office in government. We saw 2 million more disabled people in work. They were really important things. What we've seen since the election...
There's a shift of people's classification. The unemployment figures became suddenly disability benefits where people were on the long term, never. You see it outside every pub in Britain. You know, disability scooters rocked up. You know, you see it everywhere. Just to let people know what's happening on screen, we're expecting a second vote to take place shortly on the overall bill. That was just a first vote on the amendment. But look, Tom, I put it to you today, we've got a terrible, terrible problem with the addiction to handouts, which both the Conservatives and now the Labour Party have implicitly and provably failed on.
I think that there's things that government could do that they're not doing through this legislation. In fact, there's no substance left to this legislation apart from the employment support, which you could probably deliver without legislation. Things like, for example, looking at awards. Is that actually the right support? Is cash the right support for someone? One of the things we consulted on as a government was actually whether, if people need an aid or adaptations, that we should pay for those rather than having cash awards. You actually need more tailoring within the system that is responsive to people's needs, that has work at the forefront. What we've seen since the election is a 50% increase in people enrolling to the PIP benefit on the back of this government coming to power. That is not an acceptable position, and the reform that was presented would do absolutely nothing to get the bill down overall. What it was going to do is just slow the pace of growth.
And Alice Denby, Chris Hope there in Westminster Hall was making the point that it's all very well for parliamentarians to vote with their constituents in terms of the number of PIP recipients in their seats, and the top 10 council areas in the UK are Labour-ran. Meanwhile, people look on and think, you know, why am I paying for this? I'm getting up work for 5 in the morning, I'm going on a building site, I'm laying bricks, I'm cleaning the houses, I'm cleaning toilets, and for what? I'm paying for people, the work shy, to sit around doing nothing. And I put it to all of you on the panel that this is fomenting a huge political backlash.
Well, I mean, the fact is that the only way we're going to be able to pay for this, we can never cut the welfare bill, which it seems Labour is just constitutionally capable of doing, then all we can do is raise taxes, which, as you say, means that everybody who's in work is paying for 1 in 10 people.
We'll go back now for the result, beg your pardon, of the second vote.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 260.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 260. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. Point of order, Miss Wade. Is it really relevant to business right now? Point of order, Helen Waitley. Madam Deputy Speaker, please.
So the second vote there, the ayes 335, the noes 260. Morris.
That's a significant majority, but as you say, this no longer is a meaningful vote. It's just not like that. It's so confused, so many amendments, so many concessions in this. But and you're right, it's not only this. It's borders. It's loads of different things. Migration going on. The backlash is already here. I mean, we're already reformer ahead. Look, and I say this, I'm not going to say I say this with respect, but I don't. It's just a reality. The Conservatives aren't even in the conversation at the moment because of your record during the last government. So the stakes are enormously high now. Now, there's one thing that is true, is that Stephen Timms did say that when this review comes in autumn, so he gave it a specific time. Now, we can say that autumn's between September and November, more or less. He's going to have to come up with a very, very serious welfare reform bill. So
there's no prospect of delivering it. There's no prospect now of delivering meaningful welfare reform in this Parliament. They just haven't got the votes. And actually, you've got a committee and report stage now coming up of a bill where you presumably have some sort of amendment, some description come forward from backbenchers, and I think will set a further direction of travel that just goes completely in the opposite. You cannot take people where they don't want to go.
I don't know what Alice is. I can see there are different dynamics at work. Suddenly, Labour MPs are looking at the fact that they're going to lose their seats. That adds another dynamic to the matter, and I think, you know what, that can change people's principles very quickly.
Well, I think if we're going to change the dynamic, I think we're going to see a reshuffle, is my prediction. And I think Morgan McSweeney's job is in peril. I think Rachel Reeves is definitely in danger, and possibly Liz Kendall as well. And then maybe there's a chance to change the dynamic before autumn. But yeah, I mean, actually, absolutely right. This isn't a victory. This is like they've castrated their own bill. And what this actually reminds me of, and Tom, you'll remember this, is when Liz Truss tried to make the fracking bill a sort of confidence motion. There were these chaotic scenes in the lobbies, whips in tears, and then eventually she had to pull the whole thing, and then she quit a few days later. This is with that level of chaos a year into the Labour government.
I agree with that, and I think actually when you track back what will follow on from today, the seeds of Keir Starmer's demise have been sown in these few days, because this has eradicated trust with backbenchers, you've alienated the Whip's office, you've created a huge public fracas with people alarmed about what's being proposed, causing massive concern, and that's damaged relationships.
Boris Glassman, I read an excellent interview with yourself in the Times of the weekend, and you know a lot of people watching the show will agree with your vision of what the Labour Party at least once was, and that is a party that represented the working classes, supported them in their darkest hours, but didn't enable them to sit on their backsides and fester and rot and drain away from the country. That's what's just been voted for by your Labour Party. Let's be brutally honest, that vote there won't even scratch the surface of the financial and the moral duty to get people out of this cancerous idea of sitting around and getting handed out. This has gone the opposite way of your vision for your party.
Yeah, and it's also a complete failure of strategic planning. I mean, but as I say, this welfare reform was, what was it, 2% of a future increase? So in a way, what's going to happen now is there's going to be, Martin, I can assure you, a genuine political argument within the party now. So, for example, I don't think Morgan McSweeney is under threat at all. I think I would abolish the Treasury. You know, I'd just get rid of the Treasury because it's...
A lot of ministers would like that.
No, because it's an impediment to industrial growth. It's full of Osborneomics, it's full of your stuff, of useless neoclassical economists who don't understand the first thing about industry. I mean, and how to produce things. We've lost it. We've got to look at the tragedy of the last 50 years. You know, first as farce and then as tragedy. I mean, Margaret Thatcher decimated our industrial production. She destroyed our shipbuilding. She destroyed mining. She destroyed a very industrial base. And everything's been coped. This whole welfare explosion is to deal with the lack of work. So what I'm talking about, my vision for the party, on the back of the defence spending, which we have committed to, and it's going to be 4% by the end of the Parliament at least. That's the basis of an industrial strategy. That industrial strategy is fundamental to the direction. So don't imagine, Martin, or any of you, that this argument is over. It's only just begun.
You're talking about the new industrial engine of Britain being the arms industry?
Yeah, weapons production, absolutely. And that's also related to doubling the size of the army. I've just come back from Grimsby. I've had 2 days in Grimsby. I spent a lot of time there. They're just kids of 14 rolling around on the streets in their choppers. It's worse than the 70s, Martin, in Nottingham, you know. They're just rolling around, occasionally nicking stuff from shops. They've got to be recruited. They've got to be trained locally. We've got to really rebuild our moral framework.
Okay, I think your microphone just fell off there. Let's have a quick nibble from you, Alice Denby. You say that Morgan McSweeney might be for the chop. Lord Glassman disagrees. Rachel Reeves would be a huge scalp to throw under the bus. But is it not the throwing people under the bus? It's the bus driver, it's Sir Keir Starmer himself.
Yeah, well, I think he's probably the hardest one to get rid of. And I would say, I mean, I completely agree with Lord Glassman that we do need to rebuild our industrial base. But the actual engine of the economy is the City of London, which has been hammered by Rachel Reeves and her employment taxes, her non-dom taxes.
It was hammered by the, after 2011, by George Osborne. It was hammered. The lack of risk in the city is extraordinary.
I think this is...
I mean, if you look at the data, if you look at the statistics,
what they say
how many floated companies during the Conservative government? There's a statistic for you.
Oh, gosh, I don't know that one off the top of my head.
Is the answer. What I'm saying is the city needs deregulation. It needs all of that.
Yes, but the city needs a different chancellor to Rachel Reeves, and the city needs lower taxes. I would think it's... I also have to say that I don't think you can blame Margaret Thatcher for the huge surge in men and young people under 40 claiming for mental health problems. That's a huge and very recent shift in just the dynamics of our population. It's absurd to blame Margaret Thatcher.
OK, we have to leave it there for the time being. Plenty more to come from Lord Maurice Glassman, Alice Denby, and, of course, Tom Pursglove, just to bring you up to date. The Commons has voted down the Crunch Amendment threatening Sir Keir Starmer's authority for now. And now it's past the second reading, but a major concession on personal independence payments was made. What next? We're back in just a moment.
Hello again, very good evening to you. This is your GB News weather update from the Met Office. If you're in the southeast, then it is going to be another very warm and humid night ahead, but things are turning fresher. The high pressure that's brought all the settled weather recently and led to some very high temperatures, that's now clearing away towards the east, and in its wake we are seeing some various frontal systems making their way in. So as a result, as we go through the end of today and overnight, quite a bit of cloud across many eastern parts of Scotland and down the eastern side of England, some outbreaks of rain too, even some rain pushing into the far southeast. Further west, a drier, clearer night, a bit fresher here. Meanwhile, in the east, like I said at the start, still very warm and humid, albeit perhaps not quite as warm as it was last night. Then, as we go through tomorrow, a few showery bursts across parts of the southeast. These are likely to turn a bit heavier, maybe even thundery later. Down the eastern side of the UK, it is going to be a cloudy and at times wet start. Some of the rain could be quite heavy. Meanwhile, all the time across western areas, it's a drier, sunnier picture. That being said, there will be a few showers from the morning across the far west of Scotland, maybe even in the far west of Northern Ireland. And these showers are going to become a bit more widespread across Scotland and Northern Ireland as we go through the day. But there should be some sunny spells in between these showers and away from eastern parts of England and Scotland, where it is still going to be pretty wet. Other parts of England and Wales having a decent amount of sunshine, and although temperatures won't be anywhere near as high as they have been to start the week, it is still going to feel pretty warm in that sunshine. As we go into Thursday, it's a dry picture for much of England and Wales, but cloud and rain with some blustery winds coming in from the northwest, affecting parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That unsettled weather is going to eventually feed its way southeastwards, but it's going to take until the weekend for many central and southern parts to actually see much of that rain. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me. You got me good there.
Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight on the
Unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, it's a dramatic night in politics, and welcome back to GB News Tonight with me, your host, Martin Daubry. Now, proposals to reform the welfare system have passed their first Commons hurdle this evening, with MPs voting with a majority of 75 in favour of the Labour Party's welfare bill. Let's have a quick recap.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 260.
The ayes to the right, 335. The noes to the left, 260. So the ayes have it, unlock.
There we go, a victory for Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party, but was it a hollow victory? Let's cross now to GB News' political editor Chris Hope, who's in Westminster Hall with Helen Whately, the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. Chris, over to you.
That's right, Martin. With me now is Helen Whately, the Tories' Shadow Work and Pension spokesman. Helen Whately, what just happened in there?
Oh, it's been an extraordinary afternoon in the Chamber. I mean, already Labour had been making U-turns on this welfare bill. It started out saving £5 billion, then they made a U-turn which brought it down to about £2.5 billion. And then literally in the Chamber this afternoon, the Minister stood up, made an intervention and pulled half of the bill out. He can't even say now how much it's going to save, but what is crystal clear is that the government's economic credibility is in tatters and Keir Starmer's authority is in tatters too.
It feels like Number 10 has lost control of the backbench Labour Party tonight.
I mean, Number 10 has lost control of their backbenchers, they've lost control of the whole of government. Governments have to be able to make difficult decisions. It's impossible to see how Keir Starmer will be able to make any difficult decisions in the years ahead. He cannot control his party. And actually, you know, it was his fault and Rachel Reeves' fault. They got themselves into this position. They brought forward really bad legislation, really inadequate, insufficient savings as well. And they didn't listen to their backbenchers and they didn't listen to us either. And they have brought this on themselves.
These plans were going to cut £5 billion a week ago. Is that figure really £0 now, as your leader, Kevin Badenoch, says?
I mean, it could well be down to absolutely zero. These have been diminishing savings. The Minister himself couldn't say whether there would be any savings now, and there's a review which will determine really whether there will or there won't. So this could be all this fuss, but potentially no savings.
And just finally, your party wants to cut the benefits bill. Why did you vote against cuts in the benefits bill tonight?
Well, I mean, I don't know how anyone actually could vote for the shambles that we've seen this evening. And we were quite clear what we would support. We would support more savings, we support getting more people into work. This bill didn't do that. As I say, it's next to no savings. Actually, you're just going to have civil servants working away and doing something that's not proper reform. What they need to do is bring forward real reforms.
Helen Whately, thank you for joining us tonight. Helen Whately there, she's the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Martin, saying there she thinks it could be now £0 saved from the benefits bill, and that is a big issue now for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. Are we looking at a need to push up taxes or increase borrowing in the budget later this year? But joining me now also is Toby Perkins, a Labour MP, and we'll find out how he wants to react straight away. Toby Perkins, how do you vote in that bill?
I voted to support it.
So what happened tonight?
Well, what happened was we, in the run-up to this vote, myself and many other colleagues had real concerns about the direction of this bill, particularly around PIP. I'm glad to say that the government listened to those concerns, and ultimately we've ended up, I think, with a bill that people were able to support.
And yet, what is the bill now with the PIP? With the PIP changes gone, what's left of it? It's a husk of a thing.
Quite a substantial amount is left of it. The universal credit is left of it. The most important parts, if you like, were the ways in which the government were going to help people who are disabled get into work. We've got the ability to try work so that you don't risk your benefits if you're trying work. That's one of the big barriers to disabled people getting into work. So I think there's quite a lot left. Actually, what's gone out of it was the things that people were writing to me about, really concerned in the last week or so.
We've got Maurice Glassman, who founded Blue Labour, in the studio with Martin Daubney. He's saying the party needs to have a lot of thinking about what's it for, what on earth is it up to. They can't cut benefits, and the fact that you can't cut benefits in areas where reform do well, it's literally a good thing to do, isn't it?
Well, I think I didn't hear entirely what Maurice, who obviously paraphrased what he's had to say, but I think, we're very clear on what the party's plan for change is. I think you can see the direction of travel on National Health Service, what we're doing to support children out of poverty in schools. I think it's pretty clear what this government's about, but I think we did have this wrong a week ago. I had to say that, and I'm glad that the Prime Minister listened, because I think we've ended up inelegantly, I admit, but we've ended up in a much better place.
Okay. Terry Perkins, thank you for joining us tonight on GB News. So there you have it. Labour trying to brush off tonight as a little local difficulty. We got there in the end. But I think joining me now, I think we'll get Nigel Farage with you in 1 second.
Chris, we'll come back to you for Nigel Farage in a moment, but I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio now by Dr. Shani Danda, one of the UK's leading disability advocates. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company.
Thank you.
What do you make of tonight's bill? Presumably you're delighted, because ostensibly it won't change anything about people's PIP entitlements.
We won't know that until obviously the timmed review, so it's, I think, delayed the agony for now, because when the government last did a consultation, which was for the work capability assessment, the High Court actually ruled that as unlawful because it was rushed, it was ill-informed, and we don't know if the government will consult with disabled people in a meaningful way. I really hope that they do, now they've been given this opportunity to.
Dr. Shani, anybody with a heart, anybody watching the show, anybody in Britain would totally concur and agree that those who genuinely need the support of the state should be in full recipient of that. But do you concur that we may have an issue where some people are gaming the system? Some people are able to work, but they're making out they're not. That was the point of trying to get to the bottom of this, trying to make sure that people like yourselves genuinely get the help they deserve. But we're in a position where in some constituencies, 20% of people are now claiming they can't work because of anxiety and depression. Do you admit that some people might be taking the mickey?
Well, the DWP's own figures say that disability benefit fraud is less than 1%. So, the media is telling us one thing and the DWP's own findings are telling us something else. I think it's understandable. We're really living in tough times, a cost of living crisis. People are actually struggling to get jobs. I'm not saying that there's not going to be anyone out there that isn't being dishonest. Of course, we're going to expect that. But when the figures are less than 1%, we've got to remember this is a 40-page form you fill in. You've got to give reams of medical evidence. And many people actually only get this support after going to tribunal if they have the energy to take it that far.
But we are facing £100 billion per annum benefits bill by the end of this decade. We simply can't afford that, or if we can afford it, it will inevitably mean there'll have to be tax rises on the working population. That's a system that's unsustainable.
I think there's so many ways to make this solution much more better than it is. Imagine if we got more disabled people in work, how much more that would bring to the Treasury. But there are so many things that prevent that from happening. I live in London, I can't even use the tube, it's not accessible. Some of these jobs that they want disabled people to go into don't exist. And if they did exist, how are they going to get there? There's no accessible housing. We need a holistic approach. If people's accessible housing needs are met, they're 4 times more likely to be in work. This isn't just about pushing people into jobs that actually aren't accessible.
While we wait to get connected with Nigel Farage, thank you. Thanks for that. Let's bring you guys in. Look, you'd have to have a heart of stone. You know, no Morris Glassman to
I do, you know I do.
What I'm saying is, have we got ourselves into a position now where the Labour Party certainly is unable to differentiate between the genuinely needy who deserve our full support and commitment and the fact that some people might be gaming it? We'll come back to your thoughts, mate, because we can now cross back to Chris Hope. He's with Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK. Let's go.
No, we love Morris.
Nigel Farage, welcome to GB News tonight. I'm your host, Martin Doyle. What do you make of tonight's vote? It seems we're talking about it here, something of a total farce.
2 points to make, Martin. I think one, very clear that this bill has been watered down beyond recognition and is virtually meaningless, and we'll see what comes back next week. But kind of the rebellion was still there, but it was stilted. But there's a bigger picture, I think. It's a quote from way back in the 60s when Macmillan's government was in trouble. Never again, glad, confident morning. And I think that now applies to Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party and as Prime Minister of our country. U-turn after U-turn after U-turn. Denial of what he said in the speech on immigration. Oh, I regret it, I regret it, I hadn't read it. A self-admission that he's a puppet. And today, to avoid potentially a massive defeat in the House of Commons, a watering down of a bill that renders it almost meaningless, I think. So I'm looking big picture. This government is in big trouble.
And Nigel Farage, you voted against this because presumably the Reform Party would like to be much stricter on benefits to help get rid of this £100 billion per year by the end of the decade. It's simply unaffordable. What should be done to try and grasp the nettle?
Well, firstly, we voted against it because I won't lift a finger to help a government that is doing so much damage to our country. And I say that after 2,000 young men have come across the English Channel in the last 2 days, many of whom will do us great harm. But I also think that the idea that 1 in 10 of working age are on disability benefits, that many of them have been signed off by their GP on a 10-minute Zoom consultation, is a complete and utter nonsense. And the government themselves were saying, look, there are people, and I quote, taking the mickey out of the system. What happened tonight didn't address any of that. And we have to address that because we have to be fair to those whose alarm clocks go off in the morning, go off and work, pay their taxes, run their small companies, work as taxi drivers, whatever they do. Many of them, millions of them now feel, why bother? I'll be as well off on benefits. And that gap between unemployment and employment has to widen, and nothing this evening that's happened has narrowed that.
Nigel Farage, the Labour Party's attitude tonight was almost to seem to bury their head in their sand. They won't go cross-examine any previous claims. They won't analyse any future ones until after a review. Surely now the time has come for a much more rigorous process of how you get benefits in the first place. And how about taking everybody in who's already got a claim to make sure they're the real deal?
Many of them who are on these claims have come in the last 5 years, since lockdowns, since the catastrophic impact of the pandemic that our government put upon us. And frankly, and I'm going to repeat the point, many of them on a 10-minute Zoom consultation with their family GP, I'm a bit depressed, doc, have been signed off for life on disability benefits, which of course means they get more than normal unemployment benefits. The whole thing needs to be looked at again. It is unfair to taxpayers. It's bankrupting the country. It's also, I think, reducing our sympathy for those who are really in trouble. I want to live in a society, a post-1945 society, where the welfare state is there as a safety net for those who can't help themselves, not for those who want to game the system. And that's the truth of it. Liz Kendall, the minister, recognised that at the beginning. Unfortunately, the Labour backbenchers couldn't deal with the truth.
And Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK and MP for Clacton, thank you very much for joining us on GB News tonight. And let's get some reaction now. Back in the studio, I'm still joined by Dr. Shani Danda, of course, one of the UK's leading disability advocates. Just to repeat what Mr. Farage was saying there, he says that the country deserves a welfare system that truly supports those who are neediest, but repeating that point, that there is a feeling that the country is being gamed and people are being encouraged to sit around claiming benefits, and people who go to work at 5 in the morning are watching this and thinking this is absolutely broken.
Well, me and Nigel Farage agree on something. This does need reform, but it needs reform in partnership and co-production with the people that it affects. And there's also something else that I think is really missing from this conversation. 8 in 10 disabled people acquired their disability. They were not born with a health condition. So this isn't a bill or a conversation that only affects current disabled people. Non-disabled people should really be concerned about this. This will affect their future. It's not a case of if it happens, it's a case of when.
Does it frustrate you that there seems to be a backlash from people to people on benefits, people on PIP as a whole? And that's not fair. It's not fair to people who are genuinely in need of it. But that's because we don't have this differentiation. And Mr. Farage there was saying we need a much more rigorous cross-examination of every claimant in the land to make sure the genuine get it, but the ones who are taking the mickey, they don't.
Well, I think this whole, bills come about because they want to save money. Why do we need to reassess people that have got lifelong conditions? That's a waste of money. I don't think we need to reassess every single body. But I think what does need to happen is a better understanding. Those that live with mental health conditions and non-visible conditions, they're still very valid and also debilitating conditions. In fact, 70% of disabled people live with non-visible conditions. So maybe it's this group of people, MPs and parliamentarians, that need a bit of disability awareness training.
That's a very, very valid point. Lord Maurice Glassman.
Yeah, it looks like we've got to have a conversation about what is sanity. I mean, this is gone, and it's got to be relational. This is the whole thing. I think that with AI, we can certainly really decimate administrative jobs, and we've got to get people from behind their desk and meeting people. I mean, a 10-minute Zoom to assess, that's nothing at all. There's got to be genuinely a rebuilding of relationships in society. This is the opportunity that's coming. And then through that, there can be a conversation about what is and what is not an issue of sanity. I mean, Blue Labour started precisely because to be unhappy is normal. It's not a blinking condition, is it? It's just a response to life.
Alice, let me just get a final point from you before we go. Nigel Farage there was saying we have a system now where work isn't rewarded. To sit at home is seemingly seen to be rewarded, and more to the point, he made the point that this will torpedo Keir Starmer's ability to rule the country. Is it that serious, or would Nigel Farage just say that?
I think it is that serious. And I think the point that I'd like to end on, I was actually chairing a panel of disabled business leaders this morning, and what they said was what we want is promotion, not pity narratives.
Yeah.
And I think it's an insult to the grit and determination that disabled people face every day to have people that would prefer to just be signed off work. It's not fair to those people to consign them to a life of dependency on the state. And it's not fair to the vast majority of disabled people who want to work, who just want to get on in life, and who want, as you were saying, a system that supports their very individual and diverse needs.
Lord Glassman.
Yeah, I think it's worth remembering that 79 to 81 was a disaster for Thatcher. The 81 budget completely rebooted that government before your time, sorry. What I'm saying is, I don't agree. There is a possibility they've got 4 more years, this government. Don't be under any illusion it's going to be earlier than that. They've got to really clarify the direction and definition. Keir Starmer needs to clarify his identity.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you to my magnificent panel. Thank you, Dr. Shani Danda. Pleasure to have your company. Thank you. Lord Maurice Glassman, Blue Labour, and Alice Denby, City AM. Thank you very, very much. Now, I'll be back tomorrow 3 till 6 p.m. But coming up next is State of the Nation with Matt Goodwin. First, though, here's your weather with Alex Burke. Have a great evening.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, very good evening to you. This is your GB News weather update from the Met Office. If you're in the southeast, then it is going to be another very warm and humid night ahead, but things are turning fresher. The high pressure that's brought all the settled weather recently and led to some very high temperatures, that's now clearing away towards the east, and in its wake we are seeing some various frontal systems making their way in. So as a result, as we go through the end of today and overnight, quite a bit of cloud across many eastern parts of Scotland and down the eastern side of England, some outbreaks of rain too, even some rain pushing into the far southeast. Further west, a drier, clearer night, a bit fresher here. Meanwhile, in the east, like I said at the start, still very warm and humid, albeit perhaps not quite as warm as it was last night. Then, as we go through tomorrow, a few showery bursts across parts of the southeast. These are likely to turn a bit heavier, maybe even thundery later. Down the eastern side of the UK, it is going to be a cloudy and at times wet start. Some of the rain could be quite heavy. Meanwhile, all the time across western areas, it's a drier, sunnier picture. That being said, there will be a few showers from the morning across the far west of Scotland, maybe even in the far west of Northern Ireland, and these showers are going to become a bit more widespread across Scotland and Northern Ireland as we go through the day. But there should be some sunny spells in between these showers and away from eastern parts of England and Scotland, where it is still going to be pretty wet. Other parts of England and Wales having a decent amount of sunshine, and although temperatures won't be anywhere near as high as they have been to start the week, it is still going to feel pretty warm in that sunshine. As we go into Thursday, it's a dry picture for much of England and Wales, but cloud and rain with some blustery winds coming in from the northwest, affecting parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. That unsettled weather is going to eventually feed its way southeastwards, but it's going to take until the weekend for many central and southern parts to actually see much of that rain. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge.